Welcome to the Huntington Way Show, where we help parents navigate the educational maze. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, author and founder of InspirationalHomeschooling.com, and I'm speaking with Carolyn Martin. She is the CHEC Director of Government Relations, and we are talking about legislation that impacts home education, parental rights, and religious liberty. I want to thank our sponsors, the Huntington Learning Center and Inspirational Homeschooling, for bringing this show to you. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. Please like and subscribe to Power Talk 1040 on YouTube. Welcome to the show, Carolyn.
Thanks for having me, Yvonne.
Great to have you here. It's always good to have you here. So, for those who haven't heard our conversations in the past, can you share what your job entails as the CHEC Director of Government Relations?
Yes, well, mostly I advocate up at the Capitol. I mean, that's the core of the job, right? I advocate for home education, religious liberty, and parental rights. But then when the legislators aren't in session, there is the administrative state who builds all these rules and regulations that people have to follow. So I am definitely tracking like the Board of Education, the Public Health and Environment agency, department. So there are a lot of things that I have to do as far as working relating to the government, you know.
Yeah, and it's a year-round thing. It's
It
not
is.
just in session, right?
It is. It is. When I kind of like put things on hold during session and just focus on that. But all year, the government's busy trying to take away your freedom. So
Yeah, so what you do is incredibly important, and I really thank you for that.
thanks, Yvonne.
Yes. So can you explain what positive rights and negative rights are?
I'll try.
Okay.
I'll try to succinctly do this. It's not the easiest thing, but our government, our system of law is based on negative law and negative rights. The whole thing about natural law, right? And that we were created by God with certain unalienable rights. Those are negative rights, rights that God has given us and that the government must secure, right? And they would protect them. But positive rights are what other countries deal in. This whole idea of positive law, where the government creates a right and then they have to protect it and provide for it. So, for instance, in 2022, they passed a fundamental right to abortion, and now they're calling it reproductive health care. They created a fundamental right to reproductive health care, which means the government now needs to protect the right for you to kill your baby, right? Or to allow for children to get gender affirming care. So those kinds of things, they've created this right, and now they have to to legislate it. They've got to make ensure that it's done properly. They've got to provide for it in the terms of money paying
Mm.
for it. So that's what we're seeing. And you will see that on the ballot because now they need to put it into the Constitution so that it becomes a constitutional right.
Hmm. So, in short, when you have a positive right, that means that the government is going to provide something.
Yes.
Okay. And then when you have a negative right, that means that the government is not going to interfere.
They're
So
not
negative, not interfere.
right. Exactly.
Positive, provide.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
kind of how I
That's
can
how you can,
remember it.
yeah, it's a little bit more complicated, but yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we have parents' rights, and we want to talk about that today. And parents' right to direct the upbringing, care, and education of their children, is that a positive or a negative right?
Definitely a negative right. This is something God created the family, right? He created men and women to join together in marriage and procreate, right? So the parents are the ones who are supposed to be responsible for taking care of their children, not the state. But that's not how the world out there sees it, right? Our country is different. We say, yes, the family was built by God. And so we're going to protect that ability of parents to provide for those things. So, yeah, it's definitely a negative right.
Mm, yeah, that makes sense. And I just go back to, I mean, here we are just before Independence Day, and we're thinking about how our nation was created on biblical principles and created with family in mind, where we take care of our children. So this is such a timely interview. So I want to just talk a little bit about how the right of education for children kind of came up. We've talked about maybe in the past an international push. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, there has been an international push since the beginning of really the country, right? This international push for a right to quality education through really the United Nations. It comes through the United Nations. There was a treaty that was brought forward, the UN Convention on the Child's Rights. And through that, then they created this whole thing. Well, actually, UNESCO was created before that, but this education push that government should provide for education, that children have a right to education. But in the negative rights space, we think that God created the family and we inherently want to learn and grow, right? So that ability to learn and grow really comes about through liberty, right? When you have liberty, you're able to learn and grow. And but that's not how they see it. They want to constrict it and say we have a right to this quality education, but we're going to control exactly what that means. What's the quality, and what are we teaching our kids instead of exploring all that God created, right?
Mhm.
So,
So if we're taking the parents out of the equation and somebody else is deciding what's right for the child, what what are the implications of that?
well, the implications are that as Christians, we won't be teaching our children the values of God. You know, Barna has found his latest worldview survey said that only 4% of Americans actually have a biblical worldview. So
Mm,
is that really troubling? Yeah, it is for me because our country was founded on a biblical um, worldview. So we're losing those essential freedoms that our country is built on.
yeah, and so then our values are going to go lower, and we're going to be
Yes.
confused if we're looking at humanity for all of our rights and all of our freedoms versus the unchanging Word of God.
Well, exactly, because humanity has set up God, their God. Their God is them,
Hmm.
right? It's humanism, right? And now we're being pushed toward this whole gender confusion stuff, right? What is called the queer cult, and it's trying to undermine everything that's traditional, right? The traditional family, traditional marriage, even the traditional ideas of sex, right? To upend all of that to replace them as God.
Mm.
So,
Yeah, so if children are given the same God given rights as adults, why
mhm.
must parents steward those rights?
Well, parents are capable of understanding what
Hmm.
these rights entail, right? Because with rights come responsibility. And children at 5 really don't have a sense of what does it mean to exercise a right and what are the responsibilities that come with that and what are the consequences of exercising that right. I mean, we've seen in Colorado where they've already implemented some of these rights for children, like the children have the right to decide their mental health care at 12 years old. Well, most people, when they're the application of that really is lower than that. So, 9-year-olds are deciding what mental health care should they get. Do they really know at 9 or even 12 who's
Mm.
the best person to guide them in life? Because that's really what they're doing. They're discipling children in the way that they should go, which is parents' right, not
Mm.
a counselor's right. And but if sometimes we do need help from outside sources, right, to help our children to see things clearly. And so we do employ outside help, but now they're constricted in what they can talk to children about. And so then it's the state guiding everything. And adults outside of the family are now entering into the family and really shaping what that family should be instead
Mm.
of the parents.
Yeah, and I feel like even if you are seeking outside help, the parents should still be involved. And so this is one of the issues that we are going to continue to talk about. Let's take a break. Welcome back to the Huntington Way Show. You're listening on Power Talk 1040 AM, 98.5 FM, and 95.7 FM. Please like and subscribe to Power Talk 1040 on YouTube. I'm your host, Yvonne Strachan, and I am speaking with Carolyn Martin, and we are talking about parental rights and children's rights, and why children's rights should not trump parental rights. So, Carolyn, we just left off before the break talking about um, children and adults both having God given rights, but why must parents steward those rights? And so you had mentioned 9-year-olds making some of those decisions and the mental health. So I just want to give you an opportunity to expand on that.
Yeah, sure. Well, this session, we saw a bill. It was called the Bill of Rights for Foster Youth, and it really dealt with youth who are in the foster care system. But I can tell you, when I read that bill, it kind of took my breath away because it laid out all these rights that are given to children that the parents aren't the ones stewarding, or even the home that these youth are put in, these troubled youth are put into. um, there's no adult really overseeing those. It's all on the child. And some of those rights they gave them were a right to education, which I know we'll talk a little bit more about, but this right to privacy, like if they have a bag that their backpack that they're bringing home from school, the foster parents wouldn't be able to look into that bag. What if they suspected the child was on drugs or had some sort of form of weapon or something? No, you would not be able to protect the rest of your family. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what about they talked about a right to basic essentials, and one of those essentials was culturally appropriate food and clothing. Now, I'm not really sure what they meant by the clothing piece. I mean, and what's being done that somebody's limiting their clothing choices, but this idea of food. I mean, I grew up. My parents were like, "You're eating what's on the table," and
Right.
and if someone else is providing for that child, um, through the youth foster care system, I think they should still be a part of that family, right? But that's not how the legislators see it. Another one was the child had to consent to go to church. If the family's going to church that they're living with, they had to consent to it. So that upends the whole family. Let's say the child is 5, because
Mm-hmm.
it went all the way down to 5 years old that
Oh,
a child
wow.
could object. So you can't leave that child at home by themselves if the rest of the family's going to church. So it really disrupts this idea of parental authority or even adult authority in a foster care system,
Mm.
right? So there's some of those things that are going on, but this has been happening for a long time. Um, when the U.S. did not sign the UN Convention of the Child's Rights of a Child, or Convention on the Child's Rights of a Child. I don't know why they named it that because it's so confusing. But anyway, when President Clinton and his administration signed on to it, the Senate did not confirm it. So instead, what they've been doing is state by state, just putting into the state's laws this idea of child's rights, which
Mm.
is really a part of the UNCRC, the UN Agenda 2030, this whole sustainable development goals. They actually have a sustainable development goal for education, which talks about all these rights of children.
Mm.
Parents really don't have the rights, it's the child.
Mm. Well, boy, you had just talked about this being really an international thing. And I think that a lot of parents don't really realize that this is happening around the world, and what happens around the world impacts us as a nation and impacts our families. So it is of great benefit to understand what is going on in the world, in your country, and then in your state, in your city, and so on. I mean, you want to reach out and get to those roots. And this is
Yeah.
part of what you do as you're really looking into some of these legislations is you delve deep. I know you really look and research tremendously.
Well, yeah, I mean, you read these and you go, what's wrong with that? I mean,
Hmm.
most people would say, well, of course, children have rights. Yes, they do. But
Hmm.
who's the one that's stewarding them until they're old enough? Because they can't. If you really think about it, they can't. I mean, as children grow, you give them more and more responsibility, right? But
Hmm.
they still, and because then they're dealing with the consequence themselves. But we, what the state has been doing is saying, no, these children have rights above parents. And it's troubling there's some other things I wanted to kind of throw out there as well. I mean, this is one that I've been dealing with a lot with the mental health care because that's the wedge that they're putting between parents, right? In 2019, um, when they passed the law for the 12-year-olds to be able to get mental health care without parents. I tried to at least say, at least the counselors would tell the parents if their child was suicidal, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's like the minimum bar, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so they passed that, but then 2 years later, they stripped it out of the law. So unless the counselor thinks it's wise to tell the parents, it leaves it all in the hands of the counselors. And so if you have a good counselor, they're going to let you know. But if you have counselors that the state has authorized your child to see or push your child toward, I can probably guarantee that they're not going to be notifying you. So there's things like that that continue to go on. This last year, they continued a program called I Matter, which is really, and if you're a homeschooler and you think you're getting out of this system, you're not, because they advertise this on social media everywhere of this
Mm.
I Matter program, and it's a government run mental health program that's really through the telephone, right, or Zoom, right?
Mhm.
And children can go on there, take the survey, and it's hilarious because if you take the survey, pretty much everybody needs help.
Oh,
So
great.
you need to go ahead and get a counselor, and a lot of these counselors are pushing the LGBTQ agenda. And they're not notifying parents, of course. And so they're pushed into the system where they get these 6 free mental health care visits without parents even knowing about it. And by then, it's kind of too late. Parents, you won't know what's going on with your kid. Why is my child thinking this way or that way? How can I help them? You know, you're really out of control at that point. So that program went forward. And really, what their goal is to get counselors in every grade and every classroom so
Mhm.
that they're the ones that are guiding those kids throughout their education career.
Mhm.
And then there was the mental health assessments they passed last year. At least we were able to get some parental rights restored into that bill, but it's still out there. They're assessing kids, and they want to assess all kids. And you can imagine where that goes if you have something on your record that you were assessed and you needed mental health.
Mm. Yeah, so it seems like if you're cutting a parent out and your child needs help, how are you supposed to assess if they need help? And how would you even be able to help them if you don't know what's going on? And then the other point I want to make is you can have like a 5-year-old that, you tell them about Santa Claus, for instance, and they believe in that. So they don't really know better, or they want candy all day, and you're just going to cater to everything that they want, to whatever makes them happy. They don't know how to um, take the responsibility, and that's that word again, for those rights.
Well,
And
and they
that's
don't
why we
think
parents
long
need to.
term, right? They
Yeah,
don't think about long term consequences. If I
yeah,
eat all this candy now, what does that mean for me, 10, 20 years from now,
yeah.
or my teeth gonna rot or all
They
of
don't
those other
understand.
things. They don't understand. And that's why there is always when they even talk about children's rights, we all know that there will be an adult or somebody that's older than them, guiding them in
Hmm.
how to make their decisions. And so, who are those people going to be? Well, they want it to be the state. And I've talked to even teachers that are coming out of teacher college, and they are being taught that they know better. And these are young kids coming out of teachers college.
Yeah,
They know better than parents because they've studied child development and everything. And it's like, really? No, parents actually know better
right,
their child. They live with them 24/7. They know, what triggers them, what makes them happy, what their
right.
personality. They know them to a depth that you can't get just being a teacher. So the whole society is gearing up toward this idea that the state is really the one to take care of children. I mean,
Oh,
you've seen it in the
yeah,
books that we read, the dystopian books, right?
yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. It's in literature classes in high school. It
Yeah.
is literally everywhere. So, Carolyn, what do people do? We need to you know, give them a call to
Yeah.
action. What can people do? This is concerning.
I know, right? Well, I say you need to educate yourself first, right? You need to know really what's going on. I've been telling people you need to understand what the agenda is that they're pushing, right? Understand where this is going and also we need to understand our founding principles, right? And where we came from and why this country is so different. And we're the only ones where liberty can thrive if
Hmm.
we can actually live according to those principles that were founded, that were innate in our founding. And where do they get those principles? From the Bible. So we all need a biblical worldview. If 4% only have a biblical worldview, they don't understand founding principles. So, so we need to educate ourselves. We need to inform others, and with our children, for sure, we need to be teaching them these founding principles because then they will see, ooh, that doesn't fit with this, and so they will reject it. And they're the leaders of the future. They're going to be the ones who are going to bring us back to these founding principles, or we're losing it. And I don't know where we're at in that timeline. It feels like it's pretty late.
Right.
So I don't know, but we still continue to try to educate ourselves, educate our kids, inform other people of what really is going on, and then um, and then just help where you can
Hmm.
and fighting back against this taking away of our parental rights.
Right. So let's bring this back to what you do.
Mm,
How can people find you? They should sign
yeah.
up for some emails
For my
and some
prayer emails, I have a
and some
yeah.
legislate and check is funding your work. And
Right.
so what can they do to help,
Yes.
support you? So tell me
Absolutely.
all that.
Okay. So I do during session, I put out a weekly prayer email that kind of tells you, well, from my heart, how I'm doing, up there, what's going on up there in that dark world, but also what are the action items that if there's a bill coming up, hey, you might want to weigh in on this. Let your legislators know. I can't talk to all 100 of them.
Hmm.
So I need help. So if you sign up for that at check.org/freedom, you can sign up for my prayer email. And then off session, I write the prayer email monthly. So there's always something going on. So always wanting people to get involved in some way. And then to donate, you go to check.org/donate and specify that you want to support the Colorado Homeschool Freedom Team. And that helps fund the work that I'm doing. And I really need some help. So we're hoping to bring on some more people that can help me. So we need some funding for that as well. So, yeah, just get out there, sign up for that kind of stuff, and pay attention to what's really going on.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you for the work you do.
Thank
I
you.
hope that our audience really prayerfully considers supporting Carolyn and this important work, not just in our state, but I mean, this impacts everything. It impacts families. So I want to thank our sponsors, the Huntington Learning Center and Inspirational Homeschooling, for bringing this show to you. This is Yvonne Strachan, today's host on the Huntington Way Show, where we support you in educating your kids.